when William came, he came bearing the crest of Normandy. These lions, one represented Normandy and one represented Maine, which was a province of Normandy. A later Norman king would add a third for England. So those lions represented England, Normandy, and Maine. Where we've seen that before. So now we still use the same emblem to this day. You remember when the Pope was asked for his blessing, which he gave, and by so doing brought a lot more military with them. The emblem at the top of Duke William's ship, the ship was called the Moira, has the Pope's emblem at the top, which I think we've seen before to show that the Pope was blessing this enterprise. Let's have a look at that, shall we? Where we've seen that before. So that emblem of England came with the Conqueror. Some think it came later because 30 years after this year was the first crusade. But here you can see it actually came with the conquerors as an emblem that the Pope had given to Duke William. And Duke William lands with 600 Norman ships. He lands at Pembrokeshire, but it's not good enough there, so they move quickly to Hastings. So here there's even more ships. Now William has a dilemma. He gets there and there's no Saxon army. The Saxon army's in the north. Somehow William has to get them to come south because he doesn't want to stretch his lines of supplies. He doesn't want the English fleet to attack his supplies, and he doesn't want the enemy around him, which is the Saxons, to attack him piecemeal. He's got to do something. He's exposed, and the Saxons will get stronger as he gets weaker. Somehow he must tempt Harold to come south. There's only one way William could do that, and he starts by attacking Harold's own village, Crowhurst, where he starts slaughtering all the people of Harold's own village. Every man, woman, and child is slaughtered. They hear of this in the north, where King Harold is, and he's begged not to go south too quick. But he feels for his people. He knows that he's got to protect them somehow. And so the armies of Morcar and Edwin are drained after their serious battles. They're too tired, too weak. So he leaves them behind, and it's Mercia and Wessex that move south. October the 6th, Harold arrives in London. He waits just a few days to get strength and a few more men. On the 11th of October, he starts leaving London and heads for Hastings. On the 13th of October, Harold arrives near Hastings. Now, we all know that the Battle of Hastings was not actually at Hastings, but it's 5 miles away at Senlac Hill, 957 years ago. The Normans are delighted to hear that the Saxons have finally arrived. Their tactics have worked, and now the English are here. Right, we can have our battle. And they set off marching 5 miles from Hastings to Senlac Hill. And they're singing as they go, singing their hearts out. I bet they stopped singing when they got to the bottom of Senlac Hill and looked up. When they looked up, what a sight. Oh my God. There's the entire might of the English army with shield wall in place, lock solid. And the Normans, they've got to go uphill to attack it. And you saw earlier what a formidable thing a shield wall could be. So they wouldn't be singing at that stage. So now let's look at the armies. The English or Saxons, they didn't have anything but infantry. That's all they had. Whereas the Normans had archers, infantry, and for the first time since Roman times, cavalry. William's first maneuver is to get the archers shooting at the shield wall, which has absolutely no effect whatsoever. They just lift the shields and the arrows stick in, very, very little effect. So then he sends in the infantry, and they just can't penetrate that shield wall. It's impossible. Then he sends in the cavalry. And again, with those severe battle axes, they would cut the horse's legs and kill the rider. It was just impossible to break through. And this is a painting of Duke William's half-brother, Odo, and he was a bishop. And because he was a bishop, he said, I can't use a sharp-edged weapon. Therefore, I'll use an iron club. That's what the painting depicts. It made sense to Bishop Odo, but not to many other people. One of the strange things about this battle is that bishops actually fought hand-to-hand combat on each side, and Bishop Odo of Bayeux Tapestry fame was one of them. So it didn't work. And it goes on again and again, time and time again, the Normans attack, time and time again, the Saxons hold them. Now this goes on for 9 hours. Now I'm sure you remember when you used to play sport, an hour, 2 hours, you were really tired. Imagine doing this for 9 hours, and they had to keep fighting. But the Normans couldn't break the shield wall. Now, some of the Normans were recruited from the lower countries, and they began to retreat. They began to get nervous and started to run down. Later, Norman propaganda would say this was deliberate, but nobody believes that. The Normans started to retreat, and the Firid, the part-timers, made a big mistake. They started to run after them, and that was just what the Normans wanted, because the Saxons had not fought against cavalry before, and they didn't realize the danger of a cavalry charge. And that's what happened. They were exposed in the open, which is exactly what the Normans wanted, and the cavalry very quickly attacked them and destroyed them. This is an impression of it. Here at the top on the left, you can see the shield wall, and there in the foreground are the Saxons that had broken away from the shield wall exactly into the hands of the Norman cavalry. So this was the beginning of the end. William now changes his tactics. Instead of shooting at the shield wall, he shoots over it, and that has a better effect. They're not protected at the back, and many more are killed. So now the Saxons are outflanked, which means the Normans are around 3 sides of them. The battle carries on, but it's now a hopeless lost cause. The tide has turned. How did Harold die? Well, not with the arrow in the eye. And I'm pleased to say that recent research agrees with that, including BBC, which have recently researched this as well. The arrow in the eye didn't happen. This is how Harold died. There. That's a portrait of how King Harold died. How do we know? We have the old Bayeux tapestry with the so-called arrow in the eye, but we now know that was not originally an arrow, it was a spear shaft. There is King Harold. That's the image that we now, historians think, is the true image. Reasons for that? Older etchings made of the tapestry in 1730 show the standing figure holding a spear shaft rather than clutching an arrow. The arrow's flights were added during repairs carried out around 1800. The first recorded record of this battle, the Song of Battle of Hastings, says this: Harold was killed by 4 knights, one of whom was Duke William. So Duke William died King Howard died at the hand of Duke William. The brothers Gwyth and Leithwin, they carry on fighting, but they know now their end is near. And soon the entire might of the Saxon army is destroyed. Very, very few escape. All the nobility of the Saxon people are slaughtered. You remember Edith Swan-Neck, common law wife of King Harold? She begs to find the body of her partner, King Harold, because typical of William, he doesn't allow any of the dead Saxons to be buried. They're all stripped naked and the weapons and clothes taken because they're valuable, but none of the bodies are allowed to be buried. Typical of Duke William. And he then gives consent to Edith Swan-Neck to look for her husband. How she recognized him, we can only guess. Maybe he got a birthmark, maybe a tattoo, we don't know. But she managed to identify him, and his body was buried in Waltham Abbey. Now then, William thinks, that's it, I've won. No, because the Witan meets immediately afterwards and elects another king, as they were entitled to do. They elect Prince Edgar Atheling, who was one of the contenders before. This time he's 14 years old. He was the grandson of Edmund Ironside, and he is elected legally to be king in October. Duke William, he's waiting for surrender, but it doesn't come. So he gets angry. And typical of William, he starts by attacking Dover. Then he moves to Canterbury. Then he gets to the southern end of London, Southwark in actual fact, where there's a battle of London Bridge. There's only one bridge over the river, and the Saxons defend the bridge against the Norman attack. So that's a battle that's long forgotten. And the Normans are driven off. They now have to go and circle around to try and find a better way to cross the Thames. They head for Winchester. Then they come north, cross the Thames, and now it's 2 days before Christmas. London is surrounded. There's no hope. They have to surrender. If you'd like to have more of this novel covers all that you've just been listening to. It's a novel about those times, and you can get it on Amazon, but I can let you have it a lot cheaper if you would like to contact me sometime in the near future. I'll post it to you, and I'll include the posting charge at 10.50. So now we come to the coronation of Duke William. Duke William was adamant he wanted to be crowned on Christmas Day because his hero was Charlemagne, and Charlemagne had been crowned on Christmas Day, and he wanted to emulate him. So although he'd only been in the enemy city for a day, maybe two, he had the coronation conducted in Westminster Abbey. So that abbey had had the funeral of its creator and two coronations, all within 1 year, the first year of its operation. He made Saxons come, but they were all stripped of any weapons. They were not allowed to have any weapons. He put Norman guards all the way around the perimeter inside, fully armed, and Norman guards fully armed outside. The ceremony commences, and when it comes to chanting of God Save the King, the Normans, who don't speak any English, only speak French, thought there was a riot and that the Saxons were rioting against the new king. And so the Normans who are armed start killing the Saxons who are unarmed. And there's a massive slaughter inside and outside of the abbey. This is complete chaos and typical of Duke William. His funeral was just as chaotic, but that's another story. Some of the housecarls managed to escape, and they formed resistance movements which plagued King William throughout most of his reign. And this resistance movement led to the stories of Robin Hood. But that, ladies and gentlemen, that's another story for another time. Thank you very much. Okay. Thank you for listening.